Well, hey there, everyone out there in GMAT Club land. Good morning to you if you're in the US. Good afternoon and good evening wherever you are in the world. It is Saturday morning for us here in the United States. So first of all, a big applause for my panelists for showing up very early on a Saturday morning. And if you are at home in a different time zone, applause to you for showing up on a Saturday evening to join our session today. But I think it's going to be a really good one. So here is what we are going to talk about today. By the way, I'm Maria. I'm the founder of ApplicantLab.com. It is the online do-it-yourself admissions platform. You do not have to spend thousands and thousands of dollars on an admissions consultant. You can use ApplicantLab and get videos and tips from me for a very small fraction of the price. So that's who I am. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about MBA rankings. I think the rankings can be a huge obsession for people, understandably so, when they are in the application process. And that makes sense. But on the other hand, I think there are also perhaps some pitfalls about the rankings. So what we're going to do today with our panelists is we're going to talk about the role that rankings should or perhaps should not play when you are trying to choose which business school to apply to. And so what we're going to do is we've got Danielle and Amisha from UC Riverside. For those of you who are perhaps not from the Southern California area, Riverside is, you guys are like close to Palm Springs, right? Sort of on the way to, right. So if you're not from LA, like there's Los Angeles and then you go sort of inland. And about 2.5 hours, there's a place called Palm Springs. So Riverside is kind of on the way, but it is in Southern California, here in sunny Southern California. So welcome, Danielle and Amisha. And we've also got Jose, whose nickname is Puma. Puma is a student at Duke Fuqua Business School, which, since we're talking about geography, is in North Carolina. And so, yeah, so I've got my panelists here. So what we are going to start with is, first of all, if you guys could just introduce yourselves, maybe what you were doing before business school, and then if you had just finished an internship or if you're about to graduate, just sort of tell us, like, to give us a background about who you are, and then we will jump into the more targeted discussion. So Danielle, why don't you get us started, please?
Hi, everybody. My name is Danielle. I actually went to UCR twice. So I went to UCR for undergrad, and I did my degree in business economics the first go around. And then I got a job out of college at a company called ACO, which was a little sub company of Goldman Sachs. And I was working as an administrative assistant. And I decided I wanted, to kind of level up in my career. So I decided to start looking at business school. So I made that decision to apply to MBA programs. I know I had gone to UCR before. I knew kind of what the program looked like, how it was structured. And it was a school that I was comfortable with, which I know maybe you want to get out of your comfort zone. Maybe you don't want to do the same thing that I did. But I enjoyed my time at UCR. I finished my MBA last year, so I got a job actually going back to Goldman. So apparently I have a pattern here. Now I'm a financial analyst at Goldman Sachs. I work in the consumer and wealth management division, and that's a little bit about myself.
Great. Amisha, how about you?
Hey everyone, I am Amisha, and before starting my MBA program at UCR, I was working at a company called Udacity, which is an online tech education company. I was working as an operations analyst of sorts, where my role was like a combination of a lot of things. I was managing programs, but at the same time was in customer service role. It was a small company back then, so like a lot of roles mixed into one. I was very inspired by the product managers at Udacity, and all of them had an MBA. And I always wanted to get into product management. So I decided that I need to apply for MBA programs. I'll get into why I chose UCR later, but all my, decisions just landed me to UCR. And right now I am working as a product manager at Zendesk. Zendesk is a customer relationship management software company. We have about 130,000 customers all across the globe. and we are B2B. So, mostly people who are working at a company using Zendesk are the ones which are more familiar with the name Zendesk. But yeah, that's about me.
Absolutely great. I'm just going to say Zendesk is a cool product. It's like an alternative to Salesforce. It's like a CRM type of, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong, Amisha, but I'm pretty sure that's the
correct.
product. All right, Puma, how about you?
Yeah. Well, hi everyone. My name is Jose, but everyone calls me Puma because my last name. I'm actually a dual degree student at Duke University, so I'm an MBA and Masters of Public Policy. This was I'm about to start my third year, and I'm gonna graduate next spring, summer. Finished my internship yesterday. Actually, I wanted to show you this because this is how the MBA looks like. It's not my apartment, but I'm moving right now, and this is some of the things that you'll get to experience. Prior to Duke, I was a lawyer. Started my career in mergers and acquisitions, and then specialized in the energy industry. So I stayed in energy and infrastructure for a while. Became a consultant afterwards, and I always knew I wanted to be more. More in the driver's seat, I'd say, less reactive. So the reason why I wanted is to get an MBA is because I wanted a formal education in business and not just the things that I was learning by myself or that I was learning in my day-to-day practice. I wanted to go to school. I wanted to have the exposure, and probably many of you are going to apply to the MBA for the same reason. Just as a quick note, I'm the first person in my family to study abroad. I'm from Mexico, and also the first person to study an MBA. And quick fun fact, my twin sister decided to study an MBA at the same time, so we're going to graduate next year, both of us. She's in Columbia Business School right now.
Oh, that's fun. Why don't you call her up and have her join us? What are you doing, sister? What are you up to?
For the next session, she'll be here.
The more the merrier. Okay, great, guys. So I think what we should do for a second is put ourselves in a time machine, a mental time machine, and go back to the time when we were applying to business school. And think about okay, did you guys look at the rankings? I'm sure everyone looks at them, but did you use the rankings in terms of making your decision? What role did the rankings play in terms of your thought process of applying? Danielle, since you went to UCR for undergrad, and then you went to UCR for business school, I don't know if you were just like, hey, I love Riverside and that's where I want to go. So I don't know if you used the rankings at all, but why don't we get started in just the same order as before?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think everybody looks at the rankings. I would doubt that anybody wouldn't. But I would say no, it didn't play a big factor in my decision. It plays a little bit. I think having a well-known name on your resume, obviously, people look at that. But for me, I went more with convenience of location was a big one for me. I was living with my parents still at the time because I knew I was going back to school. So location was a big one for me, knowing that I could get to school in 20 minutes. Cost. I think cost is a really big one for a lot of people. For me, I got a little bit of a scholarship when I was going. So that definitely played a role, knowing what I could afford. I think kind of reputation, knowing what UCR represents and the type of culture that they try to convey was a big one for me as well. But yeah, I would say rankings for me was pretty low on the list when I was making my decision.
And I think that's a great point to make, because some of the things that you mentioned are, and we can talk about this later, are in fact things that I think people should prioritize just as much, if not above rankings, things like culture, cost, location. But we will get into that in a second. Amisha, how about you?
Yeah, so for me, I had to think about a lot of things. Since I was going to be an international student, for me, it was very important that the business school is invested in their international students. There's a lot of diversity. I wanted to know if there's any other Indian student I can connect with, an alumni, or maybe someone who's in the second year who can tell me how, the culture is all around. And then at the same time, I think more than rankings, what matters is that what you want to do after you graduate, which field you want to get into. Say, for example, if you want to be a product manager, does UC Riverside invest in product management, or like, do they have any sort of clubs? Do they produce students who get into product management? Because, networking opportunity is what everybody seeks from a business school. And if you can really network with the people who are in the field you want to get into, that then it's golden. You can literally go to ranked 5 business school, and maybe they just like don't get into the field you want to get into. So I think it's important to really understand what your school stands for, what your school has expertise in. And my other opinion is, I mean, it matters if you're going into the top 10 business school, but anything after like rank number 10 is all the same, in my opinion. Of course, like ranking can get you your first step in the door in terms of like get the recruiter's attention to you. Of course, like, you're from Harvard, Stanford, you're messaging a recruiter, you're interested in the role. Of course, they're going to respond to you because you're from Harvard and Stanford. And maybe in that department, any school post rank number 10 will struggle a little bit, but then the baseline is the same for any school after 10. Yeah, so combination of product management, how much UCR is invested in international students, how much diversity there is at UCR, everything played a role in me deciding that let's go to UCR, and then rankings did not really matter as such.
So Amisha, I'm curious, because you are an international student, how did you find out about UCR to begin with? Like, I live in Los Angeles, so of course I hear about it all the time. But how did you find out about it?
That's very interesting. So in India, we have like business school fairs of sorts where a lot of business schools would come and like represent their schools. So from our school, Tamra Johnson, who's the director of admissions now, I think, she came to India and she was talking about UCR, talking about all the programs, different electives you can take, about the culture. So I think she gave us like a great opportunity to talk to her, really understand about the school. And then to be honest, even though UC Riverside is maybe between rank 70 to 100, it's still University of California. Like everybody knows UCLA. So it's like very easy to like sort of, tie it all together.
That was very smart. For a second, I lost my mouse and I'm like, I can't unmute myself. Okay, thank you so much, Amisha. All right, Puma, how about you? Walk us through your school selection journey.
Okay, so just like most people, started looking at the rankings at the beginning. So I'm gonna go ahead and answer one question that's probably gonna come up later, which is, the ranking matters. And it's like, yes, but that's not the only thing that matters. And I'd say I'm going to refer back to statistics, which is one thing that you study a lot in the MBA. They matter on average. That doesn't need to mean that they matter for every single thing that you do. So I started looking at the rankings. You go and see Harvard, Stanford. I had like a personal connection to a couple of people from Stanford. I was a lawyer. I did not know a lot of people that went for an MBA, that got an MBA. So it was like a completely new process for me. I went to the MBA fairs. I got to know more of the schools that are in a higher ranking or a lower ranking. So I was able to see the whole spectrum. The thing is, when you go through the process, you learn one important thing. Starting in the rankings is just a guide, it's a pinpoint. Okay, this is the MBA, this is how it looks. While you go through the process, you learn stuff like, do I really want to go to this school that is ranked number 3? And the let's say the people there, I have no type of connection, or the personality of these people have nothing to do with me. They do not specialize in the industry that I like, and I'm going to have a miserable time if I go there, because you're going to spend 2 years of your life going to this school. You're going to spend a lot of money. There's a huge cost of opportunity. So you want to go to a place that you like, that they want you, that you can get into, that you can pay. And like overall, it's going to be not only a step up in your professional career, but also a step up in your personal life. So what I learned through the process is that ranking matters to have a pinpoint on where to start. But through the process, you start learning more about yourself and about the type of schools and the type of personalities and industries that each school kind of specializes in. And then you start making wiser decisions on, I want to go to this school, regardless of the ranking, or a combination of factors, including ranking and the other stuff that we have mentioned today.
I completely agree with all of that. So just one second, I'm going to take a second to explain really quickly for people who are sort of just starting their process and who might not be super familiar with the different rankings. I will say that the usefulness of the rankings is at least it consolidates a lot of information about a lot of different schools in one place that you can see at a glance. It'll tell you at a glance things like, the entering class size, the, how many people enroll, how many people get in, what do they, a lot of rankings will often include, not always, but they will sometimes include things like, the top things a school is known for, average GMATs and GPAs. I think GMAT is more relevant because GPA can just vary so wildly from school to school and major to major. And so I don't really put too much emphasis on GPAs. But anyway, so if you're just getting started with this MBA admissions process, sure, you can go to the different rankings and they will at least give you a sense of like, okay, how competitive a school is in terms of getting into, right? So you can sort of look at their GMAT score and look at your GMAT score, for example. And by the way, if your GMAT score is lower than their average, that does not necessarily mean anything because it is a holistic process. And so admissions committees are looking at the whole person. So just don't get discouraged if you're just getting started with this process and you go and you're like, oh, but their average GMAT is whatever and mine's only down here. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to get in. But so that having been said, the other thing I want to tell folks to think about is that all of the different rankings, their primary purpose is to draw clicks to the parent website, right? So in fact, US News and World Report, in fact, charges you I think it's $20 or $30 a year to be able to dig in and see all of the details behind their rankings. So just keep in mind that a lot of these publications do have an ulterior motive when it comes to publishing rankings, right? They want to stir up drama. They want to get your clicks. In US News's case, they want you to pay them money to access what they've put together. So that's just something I want you all, everyone who might be watching this, to keep in mind, right? The different rankings, they also really dig into the methodologies and how do they even come to what they're saying. Like some rankings, for example, might say, like the Financial Times ranking, one of the things they include is what percentage of the faculty have PhDs. I can tell you, having gone to business school, some of the PhD professors are some of the worst professors, no offense to them, but because a lot of PhDs go straight into their PhD programs from college, they never get real world experience. And so when they're teaching, it's great, but it's like, yeah, but you've never actually led anything like you're a PhD. So for example, there are some things where you're like, wait a minute, why does this even, you're like, wow, Financial Times, you're allocating some of your percentage of that, but I don't necessarily think that's that's important. And then the final note I will make, and then we will go back to our panelists, is that also when you do look at the rankings, look at the numbers in those rankings. Like sometimes it's by a fraction, it'll be like one school has like a, if you look at the sum total of what their number or their score is, one school might be like 87.223, and then the next school down is 87.224 or whatever, and you're like, wait a minute, like, it's really not much of a difference. But since the publications have a need to publish a ranking, this school is ranked 20th and this school is ranked 21st, even if the differences between those two schools is virtually nothing, they need to have it be in a ranking. So be an informed consumer of the rankings. If you're going to use them perhaps as a starting place, but definitely do not think of them as gospel. And so I think.
Sorry, can I add one thing to your for many folks, you'll be able to relate to this. Imagine the rankings as deciding which is the best soccer player in history or the best football player in history. It depends. It depends on whatever assumptions you're making, and you usually get to choose like 5 or 6. So is it the best player, the one who makes the most passes, or the ones who scored the most goals? If you take into account the one that runs the farthest or the fastest, then you will change that metric. It will depend. And just to add one thing that we at some point, some of us did a quick analysis, and going back to statistics, there's a kind of unfair advantage for the older schools to have a better ranking because their MBA programs have been going on for a longer time. So that means that they have more alumni, all the metrics go up. So just take into consideration that a school might be amazing, their MBA might be great, but the MBA has been going on for 30 years. So how many how many alums do you think they have compared to Harvard that's been going on for like 130 years?
Right. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy at that point. Yeah, I think one of the biggest victims of this is the Oxford MBA in the United Kingdom. Oxford University has been around for like 1,000 years, but they didn't start their MBA until I think something like 20 years ago. And so I think they are unfairly penalized precisely because of this, because they just haven't had a chance yet to have generations after generation after generation of alumni in the world. And so that's a bit of a tricky thing that I think you're right. The rankings don't really account for that. It's funny that you use the soccer analogy. That's a really good one, Puma. I might have to borrow that from you. I tend to use a lot of dating analogies when I'm talking about business school. So it's like saying like, okay, who's the best person for me to like, who's the best person, the best husband material in the world? Who's the best wife material in the world? Like, God, it depends on who you are. It depends on what you want out of a marriage. But you know what? The soccer one is a little bit less emotionally fraught. So I might start using that one more. But yeah, so I think since we've started talking a little bit about culture, I think maybe we could talk a little bit about that, because I do think that the rankings will never capture the culture of a school. And Puma, you mentioned that you're going to be spending, depending on the program, 1, 2, 3, and if you're doing like a JD MBA, you might even be 4 years at a school. And so you better make sure that you like the people. The other thing I would add to that is that not just that you like the people while you're there, but the thing is, like, a big benefit of any business school is going to be the network that you develop while you're in business school. And so that way you can call on those people later, 1 year, 5 year, 10 years out. And if you go to a school where you don't click with the other people, you're just not going to bond with them. And so then, you're not going to want to call them really. They're not going to want to call you. And so that sort of longer term benefit of going to the program won't be there if you're not one of their types of people. Quote unquote. So let's talk a little bit about the role that culture played in your school decision. Danielle, I know that you went to UCR for undergrad, so you were very familiar with it. But for people who might not be familiar with that program, how would you describe the UCR culture? And did you take any steps before enrolling to make sure that, because you went there for undergrad, but maybe, who knows, maybe the MBA program is quite different. So did you talk to people in the program, or how did you research the culture before you went?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think, honestly, in the rankings too, for UCR, I know we do get a big kind of kudos for having culture, pretty tight-knit culture at our school. So that part of our rankings is actually fairly true. But I would say the biggest thing for me was, kind of walking around campus, kind of seeing that diversity, seeing the interaction between students. I don't think it was necessarily something that I researched per se going into undergrad. I think it was more so when I went into grad school, kind of talking with our office that deals with all the applications, because we actually do have somebody that Amisha mentioned, Tamara, who we all love to call our American mom, but she deals a lot with like the international students and kind of the importance that they play in their different opinions, and they bring something else to the table that maybe you wouldn't have if you've only ever been to a school with people from, America, or, it's not even just that type of diversity. It's the diversity in age as well, kind of having people coming in, that have had careers before, people that haven't had careers before, somewhere people that are in the middle. So I think just kind of having that whole diversity and seeing how people interact together was a big factor for me, just to get a difference of opinion. And I don't know if I'm wording that correctly or anything, or if I don't know how it's coming off, but that was kind of my
Yeah, no, it's great, because I think one of the things that folks also don't realize is that a lot of the learning that you get in business school isn't just book learning or professor learning. A lot of what you learn is from other people when you're talking to them in class, whether you're working with them on a project. Like, they can share those experiences with you. And so going to a school where you're going to be around a lot of different people means that you're going to be exposed to all kinds of experiences and all kinds of lessons that you can glean from them. So I think that's a really important point to make. Amisha, moving on to you, you were far away when you were trying, I don't know if you were able to visit the campus before you enrolled, but how, yeah, I have a feeling maybe not. So how, especially with COVID, right? So how did you start to get a sense of the culture when you were researching?
Yeah. So honestly, I think any international student, their main goal is to find a job after their graduation. I think that's the number one thing. So for me, besides just feeling comfortable in the university, so of course, diversity, important. How much the university staff is invested in your success, important. But then at the same time, for me, what was important was if I can land a job after my graduation, how much does this university understand about the visa struggles of international students? Because I've seen like so many public posts where universities would just mess up an application for the visa and then you're just like stuck. So it's important how many international students our university has supported in order to be sure that okay, they're not going to have an error with your application or with your approvals. Um, and overall, I think just talking to Tamra played a key role in my decision. As Danielle mentioned, she's known as the American mom. She's known as the American mom, especially by the international students, because, she just like treats you in a way that makes you feel comfortable. You can literally go to her if you're at UCR and she'll sort things out for you. So that played a big, big part in my decision. She introduced me to a couple of professors. I wanted to be a product manager. So she introduced me to a professor who teaches information systems, who supports a lot of students to get into the project management field or product management field or program management field, and he just understood the difference. A lot of times professors don't even understand the difference between project management and product management, and there's a huge difference. So you need professors like that who have that industry experience, who can actually provide you the correct resources so that you can get into what you want to get into after you graduate. And that was pretty much it. I knew that I'll be comfortable. I knew I have a professor who can direct me to the right direction, who can help me achieve what I want to achieve in my career. And then I knew that there are already some Indian students, some Indian alumni who have studied at UCR and now are successful. So talking to them also helped a lot.
That's great. And a quick point that I just want to emphasize that I hadn't thought of until you were just speaking was also like the size of the program. Some people might think, well, a smaller program might not be as good because there's not going to have as big of a network, but it also means that you get individualized attention.
Yeah.
Right? Versus if you go to a school that has 900, 800 people per year, yeah, they might have a bigger career services office or they'll have more professors maybe, but still it's really hard to get that individualized attention that you got from your professors. It sounds like really looking out for you in a way that I didn't have. So that's pretty cool. That's something that I think people should also take into consideration. Puma, how about you? How did you learn about the Fuqua, Team Fuqua?
Yeah, I saw, by the way, a message popped up earlier right now. So hashtag Team Fuqua, for those who don't know what that is, go and check it out because it's part of the Fuqua culture. It's not just a marketing slogan. This is one thing I learned through my process and then going to Fuqua. Actually, it's something very strongly ingrained in the values of 99% of the people who go to Fuqua. And then going back to one example that you mentioned, Maria, I have a similar example situation that I saw with a couple of folks that studied in different business schools, and there are some business schools that are so large that you only get a very small group of friends or a very small group of connections. Why is that? Because it's so huge, it's massive. Everyone has their own thing going on. You need to also consider if you're going to live in a big city. Example, if you're going to be living in Chicago and you go to University of Chicago, people have their friend, like I think something like 35% of the incoming class is from Chicago. They will have their high school friends there, and it is highly likely that if you're an international student or a person coming from outside the city, you're not going to be their best friend because they're already there. As opposed, or whereas in Fuqua, which is in the middle of North Carolina, Durham, North Carolina, virtually nobody's from there. So we all make friends with each other. Then Harvard, you have a class of 1,000 people. I think Fuqua is like less than half of that. So that means that you actually get to connect not only with the first years, but also with the second years. And that just expands the level of connections and also the degree or the depth of those type of connections. If you reach out to like your Harvard alumni network, and I'm going to speak about my own experience, you can send probably an email asking for a job to thousands of people. And maybe with Fuqua, that's a little bit smaller. The group is a little bit smaller, but there's a higher chance that you have a direct link or type of like personal connection to that person, whether that is because you met somebody that knows him, and it's not like 3 levels away. Also, this part that having a culture that it is more strongly connected, that it is more selective in the person on the personal side, it creates a bond or a virtual bond, indirect bond with people that have already graduated. So just to give you an example, if somebody from wants to apply to Fuqua and they call me or somebody else, there's a much higher chance that I will reply or somebody will reply, because we just went through that process. And one of the big core values is the stewardship. I mean, Fuqua is going to get mad at me because I don't remember the full name, but it's stewardship paid forward, and is somebody reaching out to you that is interested in Fuqua, is interested in Duke. Well, you were in his position at some point, or you will be in his position at some point. Why don't you connect and help them as you were helped in that occasion?
So, Puma, did you reach out to Fuqua students as part of your process? Like, how did you learn about the culture?
So one of the big stories I was saving is that Fuqua is not big in Mexico, by the way. Nobody knows Duke. The only thing that some people know about Duke is the basketball team. Usually hear about Harvard, Stanford, the big schools, the ones that are in big cities, Yale, etc. Duke is not a big thing. That's one of the things I'm trying to change, because it's a fantastic school, and you cross the border, and then in the U.S., Duke is huge. So I reached out to several people, Mexicans and internationals that I knew, mostly Latin Americans, and there weren't. It was just a handful of people that would have studied at Duke, but I saw one single pattern in each one of them. The aggregate of them, and one single characteristic in each one of them, which was they were all very nice people, like nice human beings. They were good at their jobs, and they were all open to spend not 10 minutes, not 15 minutes, but more than 30 minutes, and very open for me to follow up on questions afterwards. So these were people that were truly invested in sometimes in somebody that they didn't even know before the call, on my journey to applying. And just going back to the thing that you mentioned about the GMAT, I did not have the best GMAT. So there was some conversations when people from other schools kind of get this attitude like, oh, you don't deserve to be in this school because you don't have that GMAT. Come back when you have this GMAT, or I don't want to talk to you. People from Duke, what they said is like, oh, how are you doing it with the GMAT? I'm here. Oh, okay, perfect. So tell me about you. Tell me about your journey. Tell me about what are your plans. I want to know if Fuqua might be a good fit for you, but also if you will be a good fit for Fuqua. And that was the whole conversation. The GMAT part was like 5 seconds or less.
Yeah, I mean, that is a very telling way to learn about what a culture at a school values, right? If 80% of the conversation is around like, well, what were your grades and what were your test score, that might be a hint as to what do the people there value? Do they see you as a person, or do they see you as more of a number? And I think having that supportive environment not only makes your student experience better, if that's the sort of person you are, by the way. Like, there are people for whom the supportive environment, they're like, I don't care. I'm going to business school to learn concrete things and get a concrete outcome. And that's perfectly fine. It's just about learning about what matters more to you. That supportive culture not only for some people can be really helpful while you're in school, but also in terms of your career outcomes. So I want to shift focus a little bit now and talk about what are those career outcomes that you are seeing from your different schools, and how has your school been supporting it, your change? I mean, Danielle, it sounds, we're going to go back to you. It sounds like, you were able to use business school to make quite a change, or at least to really accelerate your career progress. So can you tell us about, just maybe not, I don't want to go into the nitty gritty of exactly how the UCR Career Services Office works, but just in general, like, how has the school been able to support your career journey?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've all talked about it. A career is obviously probably the biggest consideration when you're going to an MBA program, just that future outcome. So I think the biggest thing for UCR is we do have our own career center that is just within the School of Business versus having to use the career center that is for the entire rest of UCR. So I think having that individualized approach for us and feeling very supported and having a team that we can go to about anything, whether that's getting our resume checked or if they have connections in the industry outside, I think that's kind of been the biggest help for us. And I think everybody just feels supported, whether it's from professors or, whoever it might be. I know I've had finance professors that still work in financial industries that are able to kind of make those connections if that's something that you're interested in. So I think just having a very well-rounded community at UCR that's very supportive, whether that be from professors or the Career Center or just other students. I've gotten an interview from somebody else that was at our school for a pretty big name company. So I think everybody's just kind of willing to help pitch in and kind of speaks to UCR's kind of inclusive culture, which I appreciated when I went there. So kind of trying to do the payback thing and, hopefully I could help somebody else out in the end too.
Wonderful. Amisha, how about you?
Yeah, I agree with everything Danielle said. And since we're representing the same university, I think the only thing I can add is that, in my opinion, UCR is very strong when it comes to acquiring marketing roles. Our career center has really good industry connections. If you really want to get into marketing, I think we have everything which will lead you to a marketing role. And if you really want to get into like product management or anything in tech, our professors do a really, really good job. So these are like my two insights in terms of like which industry or which sort of field you can get into easily at UCR. But of course, Danielle is in finance. So, you got her take as well.
And correct me if I'm wrong, is UCR a STEM certified MBA program? So Amisha,
Yeah.
for people who are tuning in from international locations, can you just quickly explain what the benefit is of that STEM certification and why an international student might want to choose programs that have that certification?
Absolutely. I completely forgot about that because, now UCR is STEM, but it's so, so, so important for an international student to choose an MBA program which is STEM. And why I say that? Because if you are getting into a program which is not STEM, then you get only 1 year of work authorization. So on a student visa, you just have 12 months of OPT period, which is called optional practical training period. After 1 year, if your company is not able to sponsor H-1B visa for you, then you have to leave the country and goodbye, American dream. But if it's a STEM accredited program, then you get additional 2 years of OPT period. So besides that 1 year, you have 2 more years. So in total, 3 years, which means you have 3 attempts on a H-1B visa. And then companies are also more in favor of hiring you because they know that, it's not just like a one chance. There's like 3 chances for you. So they are more interested in hiring you because they know there's a higher chance that you will um, get the H-1B visa and you will be able to continue with them. So super, super important to go for a STEM program. Like don't go for non-STEM. It's not worth it because it hurts when there are visa issues.
Yeah, and it's funny because when I talk to applicants, yesterday I was doing like with GMAT Club sort of a more Zoom session where people could ask me anything. And one thing I talk about a lot is like, ask yourself, what is it that you want at the end of this? And if one of those things is I want to move to I just want to move to America, that's like a big thing for me, then really any MBA program with that STEM certification right off the bat is going to be a huge step up because you are going to get 3 chances to get that H-1B visa as opposed to just one chance. And so I think that's a very pragmatic thing that I think any international student listening really needs to take into account. Puma, anything to add? Anything different?
Yeah, I mean, just to say, Fuqua just got its certification to become a full MSTEM MBA. I mean, we already had the MSTEM option, but you had to take additional courses. Now, just by studying it, you get it automatically, which is a good step up in the program. I would say that obviously you get an MBA because you want to, you know, go further away in your professional career. But sometimes people are a little bit short-sighted of what that means. I'd say if you're going to choose a school, obviously look at the industries that typically people go there after their go to, but more importantly, focus on what people do after 5 years after graduation, not immediately. Because yeah, I mean, if you go to a bigger to a bigger name, Harvard or Stanford, you have higher chances that you might be able to get some good jobs in a couple of companies that are probably very public companies that are very shiny, etc. But the thing about results is that they depend on time. So you want to see, going back to this on average thing I was saying, it's like on average, how well do these people do after 5 years? What are these people doing? Not the first job. So, and I know it's an expensive education, and you want to receive the best possible education for the buck that you paid. But at the same time, the plan needs to be 5 years after, because the MBA is going to kind of shift your career, but not only immediately. And I'm going to give you an example of this. Uh, Duke is very strong on consulting, tech, healthcare, and now energy and sustainability. I'd say it's the strongest MBA in energy and sustainability. But now we're shifting from, like hydrocarbons to more renewable energy. That's part of the transition in an industry. So Duke has been betting on this. And if you go and check out the schools and the people that are in the energy industry, 5 years after graduation, where did they end up? And you see that the students who graduated from Duke end up in the best companies, the best possible positions in renewable energy and sustainability. So that is one of the evaluations that you need to make. It's not like, okay, I graduated and went immediately into consulting. It's not 5 years afterwards. Were they doing what they wanted to do in with their lives, or did they just have a job that they could get? So that's just my recommendation on choosing a business school. Is choose whatever people are doing, or a business school that will lead you to the place where you want to be in 5 years after you graduate, and not immediately the next year after you graduate.
Puma, thank you for inadvertently setting the perfect segue to a point that I have been trying to build towards. So just as a side note, before we get to the big point that I want to transition our discussion next, I just want to say, because I know that a lot of people who are applying to business school are obsessed with like management consulting as a post MBA job. I understand it. There are a lot of benefits to working in management consulting, but honestly, to your point about like where are people 5 years later, a lot of folks don't stay in management consulting for 5, 10, 20 years for a variety of reasons. And so I just think, I to your point about like how sometimes when people are applying, they're just thinking about that post MBA job, and it's a little short-sighted. Don't just say like, well, I want to go to business school because I want to get into consulting, because even the most successful management consultants often do not stay in management consulting for the rest of their careers, primarily due to lifestyle reasons. And when people don't believe me when I say that, I'm like, well, if the consulting firms didn't churn out talent every year, why would they be able to come every single year and hire hundreds of people? It's because hundreds of people have left. That's why they have those openings. So just sort of keep that in mind, sort of for folks who are like, oh, that's the end goal. It's not the end goal, because for most people at least, consulting does not become the end goal. So think about that broader career path that you want to take. Now, in terms of the segue and like the big point I want to try to make is that I'm leading, I'm doing you're a lawyer. I'm leading the witness, which is not a great thing to do, but I'm going to try to influence you guys in terms of your answer. And of course, if you disagree with me, let me know. But one of the things I try to emphasize to people is that once you get your job after business school, what matters is not the ranking of the school you went to or the name on your degree. What matters is your performance in that job. And what I have found with clients that I have worked with over the years is that many of them, they might like not get into the program they were hoping to get into, and then they're bummed and they're like, oh, but then it doesn't matter because they get to business school, they use that business school to get that job that they want. And then they find themselves working alongside people who maybe went to quote unquote fancier business schools, but it doesn't matter because if someone who went to a fancier business school and they show up and they've got an attitude problem or they think they're too good to do this, I worked for a startup immediately after business school, and some other people, unfortunately from my program, joined as well, but they were like, whatever, I'm not going to stay until 2 a.m. to try to find bugs in our software. Like I went to this, like I'm too good for it. Doesn't matter. Like if you show up and you're terrible, not terrible, but once you get that job, what matters is how well you do at that job. No one is going to care even within a year, 2 years, certainly not 5 years. What's going to matter is your track record. So what I'm hoping to get from you guys is perhaps sort of back me up here when I make this point. I've had people who go to schools that are not in the top 5, not top 10, not top 20, but then they get that job at that employer and they're working alongside people from fancier schools, and they do just as well, if not better, in their careers in those subsequent years. So if you guys have any evidence that can back me up here, I would really appreciate it, because I don't think people believe me sometimes. So whether from you, like where you worked, or if you've got friends from business school who perhaps went to a large employer, and if you have any anecdotes you can share so that I don't sound crazy, I would really appreciate that. Danielle, if you have any, we can start with you, but anyone, please feel free to jump in here.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree. At the end of the day, I don't think it matters as much as some people think that it does, especially being back at Goldman. Obviously, there are people that went to, pretty high-ranked business schools, and there's people that didn't. The boss that I work for right now, he did not go to a super big MBA program. He went to a relatively small one, and now he's probably in the top 10% in our office just in terms of revenue and everything else. So I think it's more about the work that you put in and the effort that you put in and how much you're willing to learn from either the people around you or the education that's kind of provided at the company as well. Because I know for us, we go through months and months and months of training. So I have, 2 meetings every week that are, kind of different, areas that we focus on. So I think if you're willing to put in the effort and willing to learn, and I'm very lucky to have a very good culture where I work in my office, where no question is a dumb question, and it doesn't matter if you ask it 2 or 3 times. If you're willing to, really put in that effort, they'll make sure that you are going to go where you want to go in your career, whether that's staying at our company or going elsewhere. But I would just say, yeah, putting in the work is a lot more than the school that you went to.
That's great to hear. I'm glad to hear, that they're so supportive. Amisha, how about you?
Yeah, I completely agree with Danielle. Same thing at Zendesk. The culture is that nobody cares which university you're from. Once you're in, what matters is how much effort you're putting and what sort of work you're producing. The only one thing which comes to my mind is that, as a product manager, you really have to influence people and like have them work with you towards building a feature. So maybe people who are from higher ranked business schools, they just are able to present a little bit more confidence when they're trying to influence people, but that is coming from within. That's not something which anybody else is leading you to do. So it's more of like, how much confidence you can portray in front of everyone, not caring about which business school you're from or like what was the ranking of the business school. Eventually, whatever confidence you show in front of people is what people are going to buy. So yeah, completely agree with you. Promotions don't count which business school we hired someone from. Promotions are on the basis of how you're performing right now, right there at that company. So absolutely.
And I will say, people from the higher ranked business schools, they might have more confidence, but sometimes that spills over into arrogance.
That's true.
So those of you who end up going to fancier schools who watch this, just be careful. Don't get too full of yourself. Okay, Puma, how about you?
I'm gonna get a bit controversial to add the spice here. So I'm gonna say it this way: only stupid people get impressed by rankings. In real life, so I've been an entrepreneur twice. I've worked in the best firms and started in the more boutique firms, etc. I mean, I've been an entrepreneur in different industries. I'm studying the 2 degrees. I've worked at the World Bank, etc. It doesn't matter. In the end, the only thing that matters are results, and results depend on you. If you go to business school, you're 95% of the stuff that you're going to learn is exactly the same as in other business schools. But don't get me wrong, this is exactly the same education that you're going to get probably in Coursera, or if you're like savvy on YouTube. So the information is out there. The era of technology and information, we're living in it right now. So what it matters is not that you have the information, that you have the ranking, is what you're able to do with that. So what Amisha was saying on trying to being able to influence other people, imagine you go to a factory. Nobody's going to ask about your MBA. Nobody's going to ask if you went to Harvard or you went to Columbia or to the Darden or whatever. You're going to see you. So whatever you're doing, however, how good or bad you are, is what will reflect what happens with your professional career in the short, mid, and long run.
Wow, that was pretty inspiring, Puma. Have you considered running for office? Like, maybe, I don't mean to,
Hopefully not. Hopefully not. I've invested too much education in this.
Okay, well, great. Hopefully we have been able to convince our audience today. I think we've covered most of the key points I want to make. If you guys have anything at final, we've got about 7 minutes left into this session. If you've got any final points you want to make, let me know. And then if not, I will hop on over to the questions that have been pouring in, and I will try to select some good questions. Any final thoughts, guys?
Yeah, I'll make one. I would say just kind of look and make the best decision for you. What's best for you right now going into the program, what's best for you in the future. I think Puma made a really good point of kind of looking at, 5 years post MBA and kind of seeing if, that school that you're going to now, is that going to lead you to that point? So make the best decision for you. Don't necessarily rely completely on the rankings. Do your research and you'll make a good choice. I know all of you in the section are capable. I said, you're here in the morning. If you're here in the States, or even if you're in another time zone, you made the commitment to be here. So that already shows that some drive. So get going.
That's great. Amisha, Puma, any final thoughts? You don't have to have one, by the way. Okay, none.
I have one.
Great.
I have two, actually. The first one is for the process. Get busy, but don't stress too much. Your life, your self-worth, and none of that is linked to which MBA school you go to. So when you start the MBA journey, you always compare yourself to the high performers. So you're going to start comparing yourself to the people that went to Harvard, because you're going to listen about them. The people that have the highest GMAT possible. And then you're probably going to feel bad because you're not one of them. I mean, get busy, work if that's one thing that you want to do. Also know your own limitations, but don't stress out like you're not worthy or you're not valuable in any sense just because you don't have the MBA. This is just one other skill. Does not mean that you cannot start a business, you're going to be great in a job. You don't need to make that much amount of money. Don't compare yourself. Like, you want to do it for you. That's it. And then the second thing I want to say is that for people that apply and get into the MBA, be careful. Nobody is going to get the job for you. Even if you go to the best school and it has the best career services and you have all the job postings, you got to go out there and you got to go get it. And if you're in international school, you also need to do it and probably put in twice as much energy into that, because I mean, for obvious reasons, not all companies sponsor, so you gotta want to be careful. You want to start building the connections beforehand and not until graduation. So just know that nobody's gonna do the job for you. Both things, you gotta do it by yourself and reach to the points that you want to reach and that you feel comfortable with, but do not lower your self-esteem in any way if you cannot reach that bar that you set yourself. You do what you do when you're with your life and what you can do with the resources that you have. That's it.
And it's interesting, you know, in a session I was leading yesterday, someone said, well, I have like a 770 GMAT or something. So is that going to really help me get a job in consulting? And I was like, what helps you get a job in consulting is knocking it out of the park in that consulting interview. If you walk in with your 770 and they put a case in front of you and you are just like, I don't know, like, or if you walk into that interview and you're like, I'm amazing and I walk on water, either like, you're not going to get that job. And someone who has like a 640 might get that consulting job. And they, because they walk into the interview and they're nice and they're good people and they knock it out of the park with that case question or whatever it is, the question that they are asked. So that's the other thing to think about, like not only, you know, even within your school where your GMAT ranks against your peers, whatever, man, you got to do well in that interview, and then you got to do well in that job afterwards. And once you're in, it's gonna come down to you and the person that you are. So with a few minutes left, let me just quickly check to see. I'm going to skim if there are any questions. If anyone's got any questions quickly. Oh, there are not so many questions. Someone saying thank you. I was feeling a lot of pressure to get into the top 5 BSchool. So TMSP, you made that comment. Look, it's the right path for some people, but it is not the only path. And another point I like to make that sounds perhaps a little, you know, a little harsh is that, you know, sometimes I put in ApplicantLab, like, look, if you're even reading this, think about what that means in terms of your life. That means that you understand English. It means that you have access to a computer. It means you have access to electricity. Like, you're already doing very well in life. The fact that you're even in a position in your life where you can even think about getting a graduate degree, like, you're already ahead of a lot of humanity. So I'm not saying that to try to be a downer, but like, just keep that perspective in mind. Like, these are, well, I know we're not all from the quote unquote first world, but what is referred to as a first world problem, right? When sometimes people get so in their heads about like, oh no, am I going to get into a top 10 school or like, you're going to be fine. The fact that you can read, the fact that you have access to electricity and a computer, all that stuff, like, you're already doing very well in life. So just, you know, let things unfold as they will. I think the only real question I see, someone asked a question about to Amisha about how you chose UCR, but we did cover that, I believe, Puneet. Santosh asks, if you're an international student and you're limited to specific roles because of a visa sponsorship and you can't recruit for many roles that M7 specialize in, such as private equity, hedge funds, etc., is there a realistic difference between M7 and T20? So I'm actually going to take this real quick, just because I'm older and I've seen careers unfold. So Santosh, first of all, I do not believe that there's a huge difference between M7 and T20 in terms of recruiting. I think hopefully we've covered that and we've convinced you. Even if let's say you want to work at Microsoft, and let's say Microsoft does not recruit at your business school per se, you can reach out, you can try to network your way in to get that interview. Once you get the interview, if you do well, if you click with the people, you can get that job. And once you get the job, it's just up to you, and no one is going to care what school you went to. Now, you did mention specifically private equity, hedge funds, etc. Santosh, even if you go to Stanford, if you do not have banking experience, you're not getting a private equity job after business school. If you go to Harvard, if you do not have banking or private equity experience, you're not getting a private equity job after business school. A quip I like to have is that it's Harvard, not Hogwarts. So a school can help you build upon your career and it can help you pivot careers, but you're not getting a job in private equity. I mean, every once in a while someone might, but it's incredibly difficult, right? These firms, the hedge funds and the private equity firms, venture capital firms are a little more open, but getting a paying job in venture capital is really hard. You can get an unpaid internship in venture capital. They're like, whatever, come on in and help us analyze these pitch decks. But in terms of like, some of these paths are not going to be open to you regardless of, even if you went to Hogwarts. I don't even think Hogwarts would be able to get you a job in private equity if you don't already have that banking experience. Now, what you can do with a business school degree is you can try to get a job first in investment banking after business school and then move that into private equity later, but you cannot do that directly. It doesn't matter which school you go to. So this is why when we've been talking about the importance of doing research, talking to people, looking into things like, if the whole reason you're pressuring yourself to get into Stanford or Wharton or whatever is because you're like, I have to work in private equity. Whoa, do your homework first and learn about, first of all, you can't just automatically get those jobs out of those top schools. And number two, you can get that career path from a lot of schools. It just will take a little bit more time, but as long as you get that job in investment banking first, which you can get from a lot of different schools, then you can sort of pursue that career. So hopefully that's like a corollary. Like the first part was like, once you get the job, that's really what matters is your performance, but also like, just because you go to a top school doesn't mean you just get any job you want. It's not like a buffet where you just select anything you want to do, even at the very, very top schools. Okay, I think that's all the time that we have. Unfortunately, I know that I'm a few minutes over, and I think there's another session right after this. So thank you so much again to my panelists for making time out, overall for making time out, but especially on a Saturday morning. You guys are awesome. Thanks to anyone in the audience for joining. Again, you're go-getters. I think it was Danielle that said, like, if you're enough of a go-getter to join us on a Saturday, you're probably enough of a go-getter to go far in your life in general. So thanks, everyone, and best of luck with your application process. And if you need help with your application process, please check out ApplicantLab.com. It would mean a lot to me. You don't have to, but I would appreciate it. All right. Thank you all so much, and take care. Bye-bye.